Welcome to r/RedditRevenge. This is a story of someone getting back at someone with revenge after being wronged. Thank you friends for subscribing to the channel and for so many likes. The first story. Some dude crashed into my car and tried to deceive me. After a while, I reminded him of myself. The second story. My neighbor stole my gas and it cost him his car. He moved to another place. On to the first story. Back into my POS car and blow me off for months? You'll pay, just you wait. This is a story from the better part of a decade ago, when I was pretty naive and only a couple of years out of high school. I had a bit of a rough patch after dropping out of university and ended up living in my '06 Corolla, manual transmission with roller windows, the bare bones build, for a number of months. At some point during this time, I was waiting for a pump to open up at a gas station with my younger sister, when another sedan backs out of one of the spots straight into the side of my vehicle. I got out right away, as the line wasn't moving, and surveyed the damage, while the two gentlemen from the offending vehicle approached me. As I observed 2 or 3 pretty obvious dings on 2 of the panels that join near the rear wheel well, the man from the passenger seat engaged communications, telling me that he'll give me $500 to take care of this right now. Now, I may have been, and may still be, naive, but I had been in one prior accident. Literally the first time I drove with my brand spanking new driver's license to get a gallon of milk for mom, and admitted fault very quickly, and was determined to be less panicked and more reserved in the event of another incident. So I declined the man's offer, and asked to exchange information with the driver, to which he supplied his driver's license, which I took a picture of, and his business card. His title was the Senior Vice President Relationship Manager at a bank a couple towns over, and I also made sure to take a shot of his license plate. Satisfied that I knew who he was, although with a nagging doubt in my mind about not actually collecting any insurance information, I continued with my evening and enjoyed sushi with my sister and parents. Initially, upon my contacting the offending party, communications were relatively smooth, with Mr. Banker asking me to get an official estimate, to which I obliged. I didn't know anything about vehicle service beyond buying oil changes and fuel, so I just looked up a body shop near me and went there. It was a shop one town over with a name like Frank's Auto Shop or the like, obviously local kind of place. They assessed the damage, which was purely cosmetic damage, but it would require them to disassemble most of the port side of the vehicle, as the Corolla is, as I understand, designed to be cheap to manufacture and reliable, but not convenient to do localized repairs. The estimate put us at about $1,600. I made no delay in relaying said estimate to Mr. Banker, who called me post-haste to inform me that that's ridiculous. There's no way it costs that much. They're not a reputable shop. He then informs me to go to a different shop, which is a nationwide chain. Think width of a bullet, which he says is reputable, basically all but accusing me of trying to take him for a ride. I'm living in this car, man. I'm just trying not to get screwed out of what little I have. Anyways, I oblige him because I feel it's more likely to lead to a resolution than arguing while I'm all flustered and nervous. But remember, I'm a sheltered 20-year-old who has no idea how any of this stuff actually works. So when I look up the nearest branch under his preferred brand name and go there, I discover it's a branch that's actually specialized in German cars like Porsche. I have no idea if this impacted their estimate in terms of hours worked, as obviously the Corolla would be a bit of an unfamiliar machine to them, but regardless, the new estimate put us closer to $2,000. I had an eating grin walking out of that office. So I send Mr. Banker the new estimate from his oh-so-official shop. Turns out local guys actually can give great deals. Who knew? And I believe he pretty much ghosted me from there. 1 or 2 texts may have been exchanged. It's a little fuzzy. The gist of it was he didn't want to deal with the situation, and I think he knew that I was a nervous and somewhat out-of-my-depth kid, so he wanted to leverage his confidence and bully me into silence. Reddit, I'm not proud of it, but it worked for a time. I was not really doing what I needed to do, or thinking the way I needed to think at this point in my life, so among all the other things I was neglecting, this situation fell by the wayside after a couple of weeks. My parents, frustrated with my lack of life progress, were categorically unsupportive, despite my father being an attorney. As far as he was concerned, he paid for the car, which I was grateful for, and the insurance for that first couple of months, and that's all he needed to contribute. I don't blame him, but at the time it was pretty deflating, as I was always hoping that he would be my ace in the hole. After a number of months, probably around 3 to 4, I finally found a job. It was a really sketchy pure commission sales job over the phones that's a whole saga unto itself, but it did come with a sales manager who had some experience dealing with petty squabbles, and it was he who was my savior. After a couple weeks or so of working for him, somehow the situation came up in conversation. Obviously, it probably didn't take that long. I tend to just blabber on and on about whatever's on my mind, and he suggested that as I knew where he worked and had his license so I knew where he lived, I should make it personal. Under new boss's tutelage, I proceeded to type up a written sequence of events, starting with the gas station incident, including the multiple estimates in my open communication, and its reception of demeaning demands, and I printed multiple copies. I do consider myself to be a somewhat forceful and yet still conservative, in the non-political sense, writer, if that makes sense. I described the events that transpired with no flattery to the involved parties, but also no embellishment, judgment, or personal opinions. It's fantastic what you can achieve by choosing words with just a bit of a sinister tint, but which still describe the situation literally. Then, with boss's encouragement and permission, I took a long lunch with him tagging along. We loved to go to a local barbecue place where they served a sandwich with brisket, pulled pork, and a whole Italian sausage split down the middle, all on one bun, with a whole baked yam on the side for friggin' $11 back in 2013. And we visited his condo building. I was lucky enough to be let in by a neighbor, and proceeded to tape one copy of my little novel to his door, for all the neighbors to read if they got home before him, and then slid another under his door to make sure he had a chance to experience the pleasure himself. But we weren't finished yet. His neighbors might shame him, but they have no real leverage. That's just the petty part. Next, we visited his bank. Now I was really hoping to catch him there, fluttering as my heart was, because I knew that with my boss right behind me to catch me if I faltered, I would be able to confront him in glorious verbal combat. Unfortunately, I didn't get to live out my fantasy of little guy puffed up with big guy behind him, cracking his knuckles menacingly just in case things get out of hand. But I did get to meet his boss, who was a lovely lady who was very open to listening to my explanation of why I was there, and even accepted the packet of papers I had with her own hands. Reddit, at this point, I saw the look in her eyes, and knew that this would get his attention. I didn't think she cared about me, but I didn't know that she didn't enjoy being accosted at her place of work by some random almost teenager to complain about some very sketchy behavior by her big bad senior vice president relationship manager. He texted me the next day. I don't know if it was the neighbors or his manager who put the screws to him. I can see it going either way. A guy living in a condo such as his probably cares about his image quite a bit, and his neighbors ridiculing him for such a thing could be as impactful as his boss demanding that he resolve the situation ASAP. Who knows? What I do know is that he was still very salty about the situation. I guess with my silence, he had figured he won, and honestly, he probably would have if I hadn't had a boss who took such a liking to me, and encouraged me to believe in myself in dealing with the man. His text amounted to, "I've sent the information to my insurance. As of now, I'm not involved." I was so relieved. I felt powerful and gratified, and like I was finally going to be able to move out of my car. My boss slowed me down. Before I could say anything back to Mr. Banker, he told me to just let him dictate. I happily obliged. Paraphrasing, that's not how this works. You're involved until I'm paid and made whole. I will continue to be in contact about any complications moving forward until the situation is resolved. Petty. Tom Petty. Felt pretty nice. There was really no benefit to being in contact with him anymore, other than rubbing it in his face that we had won. That his SH behavior had only compounded the issue, and now he gets to experience the bitterness of his at-fault accident all over again, almost half a year later, along with his neighbors and coworkers knowing about it, and knowing he tried to dodge it. And his manager knowing that it was one of the most baby-faced, nervous, skinniest kids possible coming up and publicly shaming him for his avarice. Anyways, that was really mostly the end of it. I don't remember if he responded to our petty text, or if there was anything afterwards. My lack of remembrance is probably evidence to the contrary. I imagine he sat and stewed in his impotence. As a bonus bit of juicy drama, remember how my dad had paid the car insurance for the time in which the accident had occurred? Well, as I said, he had been pretty radio silent on the whole issue, despite my lamenting it, and opted to just do nothing to help me for the duration of the months where I felt powerless and taken advantage of. Now, obviously, I'm very biased in my feelings regarding the events that transpired here, so feel free to call me an entitled brat if you feel I was. But what transpired next really infuriated me, and it's something I've never actually forgiven him for. At some point, I was telling him about how I had finally won, the whole story I've typed here, and how I had gone through the offending party's insurer, and was set to receive about $900 cash in lieu of accepting their obviously BS discounted repairs to the vehicle. They claimed that their guys would take the panels off for free, so they didn't have to include the hourly labor for disassembling the panels in their estimate, cutting it down by about half. My dad, who had been disaffected by the whole scenario thus far, suddenly was very invested in the payout. He informed me that since the car was still technically in his name, and since he had paid the insurance, he was taking that money. And he had every right to do so, as in order to communicate with the insurance people he had to be on a three-way call to authorize the discussion, as the title holder of the car. I felt like the fresh wind had been swept from my sails, leaving a sagging feeling of powerlessness that was all too familiar. But luck struck me once again. The insurance agent who was speaking with us was informed through our conversation that I was the driver and only user of the vehicle, and I believed it may have been mentioned that I was sleeping in it, so she did something she wasn't supposed to do. She assumed that the money was supposed to go to me. My father was only involved for that first call, and his decision to bogart my payout was made known to me and me alone. So when the same agent called me to inform me that things were copacetic, she did not ask and I did not correct her. As I mentioned, my father is an attorney. He's actually a successful one. This amount of money actually means nothing to him. It was purely the principle of the matter that he received it. As a result, I received my check a week later and used it to get my first apartment and not be homeless. And I remained silent on that front in fear that if he caught wind of his carelessness, he would demand repayment. It was pretty satisfying to inform him years down the road, now that we're in a different place in life and I do not live under his thumb, that I had received that money and that he had never even thought about the fact that he never heard anything about it. To me, it got me a flat surface to sleep on. To him, apparently an afterthought. My bonus was actually really long. I hope you enjoyed it. Edit. I honestly just included this part in the story because it seemed to fit the theme. However, the fact that it seems to have garnered more attention than the man giving me the runaround has made me really wonder. Would seeing such a public opinion of his behavior have more impact than my complaining to his face? My writing skills are decent, but in dialogue I tend to get flustered, so this is a somewhat new experience for me to have a third party that is disaffected by the situation weigh in. I was genuinely shocked that he wanted the money after all that, and it gave me a bit of an adrenaline rush to commit the crime of omission that allowed me to receive it anyways. The second story is dealing with a gas thief. Several years ago, I lived in the northwest coast of Puerto Rico. It's a very relaxed area, with tons of good restaurants and lots of green space. My apartment was on a cliff, not far from the water. The electric infrastructure was a bit old, so when it was rainy season, we'd lose power for a few hours at a time. Not a big deal, I had a gasoline generator. Enter a new neighbor. He lived 2 doors down from me and drove an amazing custom Chevy van from the 70s. All it needed was an epic airbrushed wizard on the side. Sadly though, that's where anything good about him ended. I caught him taking the gas out of an orange jug I'd leave outside in the case the generator ran out. Although I saw him do it and called him out on it, he denied it and played stupid. So after the second time, I took all the gas out of the jug, filled the generator with it, and put the rest in my car. I then went to the nearest gas station that had diesel and filled it up with diesel. A few days later, I'm woken up by a tow truck backing up to pick up his now disabled van. I looked out the window and you could see the anger on his face. He moved out the next month, and from what I gathered from talking to people in the community, he was a general piece of SH human, and what happened to him was deserved. I hope you enjoyed these stories. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Have a good day.